You can't have it, and mommy can't have it.
Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to College Football Redzone. We've had some amazing developments over the last 24 hours, haven't we not? We have our very first batch of college football playoff rankings here in the 2025 college football season. Definitely am very excited to take a deep dive into what those CFP rankings are all about, and really also talking about what is going to be the biggest games that are going to be happening over the course of this week. Games that are going to shape this CFP field as we really ingrain ourselves into the final stages of the regular season, where much of this is still going to be worked out. Lots of football still to be played, even though we are most of the way through the regular season. So definitely excited to dive into all of that tonight. But before I dig into it, first and foremost, for those of you that have been paying attention on Twitch or Twitter, as well as paying attention on YouTube as well, really appreciate all the the prayers that did come for my son, as well as for our family. He's making a full recovery. He's doing really good. So I just wanted to take a chance to really thank everybody for being so supportive of my son, who did get seriously hurt last Saturday. Really does mean the world to me. And with that being said, now that little bit of a heavier note is out of the way, man, you love the content here on College Football Redzone. Make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, as well as we set out, to do something that, hasn't been done in a very long time, and that's bringing that NFL Redzone idea and bringing it over to college football. But we're also doing some things over here too that you guys will enjoy throughout the rest of the week. So definitely make sure you like and subscribe, or follow if you're watching this on Twitch. I would truly appreciate that. Now, with that being said, we got our first batch of CFP rankings, and I gotta say, I was actually surprised. I thought I was going to see something egregious here. We'll go ahead and pull up those initial CFP rankings now. And I was actually surprised, right? I was actually surprised by how much these initial rankings made sense, to be honest with you. I was expecting to see, at least a team or two being egregiously ranked too high or egregiously ranked too low, and that honestly didn't happen. Now, do I think that's perfect in my opinion? No, I don't. But I mean, I'm just a person with a microphone. I'm not a journalist by any means. I'm just a guy that, has his own, little biases and opinions as well. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, right? So here is the top 25 of the CFP rankings that we do have here on College Football Red Zone. So let's go ahead and run through it now, right? So first and foremost, I do think 1 through 5 in my opinion, chef kiss. You know, we have our own ballot here on Red Shirt Sports. You know, we still have that top 25 coming out every weekend, and if you want to see it in full detail, that is linked down in the description. But our top 5 is ordered the exact same way. We do have Ohio State as our unanimous #1 team in the nation. We also have Indiana at number 2, Texas A&M at number 3 as well. You know, we see those 3 teams, you know, undefeated teams that have been playing extraordinarily well, have been relatively battle tested. They definitely deserve to be in the top 3. Alabama, certainly the best win-loss team in the country. They had that win against Georgia. They do have a number of other ranked victories that they can lay claim to even now. So they do have the like the Vanderbilt victory, they have the Missouri victory, as well as the Tennessee victory. The Tennessee victory, we'll talk about Tennessee specifically in a second, but Alabama at 4 makes perfect sense to me, as does Georgia. I mean, listen, has Georgia played with fire a handful of times? Absolutely. They have 100% played with fire, you know, a handful of times, whether it is, you know, being in shootouts against Tennessee or even like against Ole Miss. They were in a shootout against Ole Miss, and they were in a really close one in the world's biggest cocktail party in the Florida Gators, man. Is Georgia like the same like elite Georgia team that we saw like back in like 2022? You know, not necessarily, but it's certainly a well-coached team. And so, you know, definitely agree with Georgia being at 5. Really love how the top 5 is set up, in my opinion, right? You know, agree with it, you know, rubber stamp of approval here at College Football Red Zone, right? But then again, through 6 through 25, and things get a little bit more interesting, right? We got Ole Miss at number 6, you know, slotted in right behind Georgia. Ole Miss gave Georgia a run for their money. So, you know, and I believe Ole Miss did that on the road. So Ole Miss at number 6 makes sense. Love the respect given to BYU. BYU trenched in at number 7, and so they're coming in as our top-ranked team in the Big 12. And that's another thing too. The Big 12 is set up extremely nicely in terms of getting multiple bids. You know, you think about what happens if, you know, maybe Texas Tech beats BYU this upcoming weekend, but then after that, both teams end up winning out and getting 11-1. You can see a spot where, you know, BYU and Texas Tech, you know, they both make the CFP, and the Big 12 becomes a multi-bid league. And that's not even accounting for Utah. Utah certainly positioned pretty nicely. Should they continue to handle business, I think Utah is one of the more impressive 2-loss teams in the nation. I think they're more impressive than Texas and Oklahoma, in my opinion. Albeit, you know, I don't have a huge problem with how that's set up, but just something to keep in mind. You know, the Big 12 set up really nicely in terms of getting 2, maybe even 3 teams. If all 3 teams mentioned, they all handle business, right? So, definitely like how that's set up there for the Big 12. Oregon at 9. I understand that Oregon, you know, maybe not as battle tested as we thought we were. They had the Penn State win, and the Penn State win at the time looked extremely good. But the problem is Penn State completely fell off the cliff since then. I believe they're 3-5 going into this upcoming weekend. So Penn State actually might miss a bowl game, which, you know, if you mentioned that in the month of August or in July, you would be seen as a complete idiot or just a S-tier rage baiter. But that is the reality of Oregon's arguably best win, maybe. You would think that coming into the year that, you know, Oregon beating Penn State, that would be their best win. No, it's 5-3 Northwestern. And no disrespect to Northwestern, but Oregon's definitely being punished for it, even though the eye test suggests, for me, like the eye test suggests that Oregon is a top 5 team. I think they should be a little bit closer to being a part of that top 5 instead of falling out of the top 10 completely. So I do think Oregon is a little bit low, but nothing too crazy though, right? Notre Dame at number 10. What this tells me is that if Notre Dame wins out, they're going to be in the college football playoff. I know that there was a little bit of a debate about that, but now that we've seen the CFP rankings, Notre Dame, Now, they do have the one-ring win against USC. They have a really close loss to Texas A&M that really could have gone the other way. Same thing with Miami. Although the Miami loss doesn't look as attractive as, maybe it did in the start of October, but Notre Dame is set up pretty well. They do have possibly another ranked win opportunity if Pitt continues to play well, and we could see Notre Dame and Pitt as a ranked matchup. That would really help Notre Dame's case. But Notre Dame, and keep in mind, this is the last at-large spot that's available because of how the automatic bids are set up, right? So Notre Dame at 10, that does tell me that, hey, which is about where I would have them as well, like around that top 10. So Notre Dame, I think, is set up extremely nicely. So long as they win out, that tells me 10-2 Notre Dame will be making the college football playoff. That being said, how about the last 3 teams that are out? Texas, Oklahoma, and Utah. Texas at 11. Listen, imagine thinking that Texas is going to be close to the top 10 after, the kind of turbulent season that they have. They lost to Florida, but then, they find a way to beat Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. And they're also able to find ways to win, even though it might not be the prettiest. You think about that close win against Kentucky, but then also, you think about that close win against Mississippi State as well. A game that, honestly, Texas should have lost, to be real with you. But it really gets to a point where, you're starting to run out of, teams to rank. Texas is still a scary team to go up against. They have a ton of talent there. So Texas at 11 might be a touch high. And the same thing could be said about Oklahoma. But I see the vision there. I think generally Utah might be a little low. They're at number 13 now that I'm looking at it, but generally agree. Oklahoma being behind Texas, that makes sense. They have the straight up win. And then Utah, the thing with Utah, I still see the vision, even though I don't fully agree with Utah, being behind Texas and Oklahoma, right? Because for Utah, they do have the 2 losses, just like Texas and Oklahoma has, but Utah, they were absolutely decimated by Texas Tech. So that I can see why, punishing Utah for that blowout loss earlier in the year. But again, Utah, if they win out, they're going to be set up pretty nicely because we could see, Texas and Oklahoma possibly drop another game. Virginia comes in at 14. Now, I do think Virginia's getting disrespected just a little bit there. Here's the thing with Virginia, okay? So I completely understand that they haven't looked the best, right? They've been playing with fire at multiple different occasions with the multiple overtime games this year, not only against Louisville, who is a ranked team, but, you're also talking about a 2-point win against Washington State, who just lost to Oregon State this past weekend, right? But then you also are talking about Virginia being half a yard away from you losing to North Carolina. And we're not even sure if North Carolina is going to be even making a bowl game this year. So I understand all that. That being said, Virginia beat a Louisville team. And that Louisville team beat a Miami team where at the time that Miami team was in the top 10. Would have liked to see Virginia get a little bit more respect. And this is a tough look for the ACC. Georgia Tech and Miami both losing at the same time. I mean, that's really a worst case scenario, right, in terms of being in a spot where you're looking at probably being a one bid league here. And that's assuming that no G5 teams. And I'll talk about the G5 in a second. But, we could be looking at a spot where, what if the ACC continues to cannibalize itself and, some of these G5 contenders, such as a Memphis or a North Texas or a USF or a James Madison, San Diego State too. They're not in these rankings right now, and I'll talk about the G5 specifically. But I mean, there is a world where, if the ACC cannibalizes itself enough, we could see the ACC not get invited to the college football playoff at all. For now, they look like they're going to be firmly set on one bid. There's a lot of work that the ACC needs to do. I think if they get 2 bids or more, but it looks like the ACC is going to be capped at 2. Louisville, I do think is also a touch low, but I understand why Louisville's behind Virginia. Virginia does have that head-to-head, so that makes sense there. Now moving through to the bottom of the CFP rankings in terms of the top 25. So Vanderbilt at 16. I'm cool with Vanderbilt at number 16, to be honest with you. Vanderbilt, did just have that loss against Texas. It really should have been a blowout loss, though. I do like that Vanderbilt was able to fight back, and I think that really does help the perception. But at the same time, though, Texas had that game in the bag. They controlled most of that game. So Vanderbilt, glad that they're able to fight back, and I think that helps from a perception standpoint. Them being behind, like a one-loss Georgia Tech and a two-loss Miami does help Vanderbilt's at-large chances, but they're going to need some help in order to get in. Do like where Vanderbilt's at. Georgia Tech at 17. Yeah, Georgia Tech, I get them being at 17 as well, primarily because, this team seems very centered around Haynes King, and they've had some close calls. They had that close call against Wake Forest, and then they were in a close one against Colorado. Neither of those results are aging super well, given we just saw Wake Forest recently get blown out by Florida State, as well as Colorado just being general booty cheeks, right? So Georgia Tech at 17 with the one loss. Yeah, I understand that. And then Miami at 18 makes sense as well. They are a team that is currently descending. Now, you're going to say, what? Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame. And I used to agree with you. But here's the thing, because of how close the Notre Dame losses were, you have to almost treat them as if they only have the one loss, because of the fact that, both those games could have really swung either way if a ball bounced in a different way. Miami, on the other hand, was not only that, the Louisville loss, which is why Miami is behind Louisville at the moment. But then also on top of that, for the Miami Hurricanes, they lost to SMU. SMU is not even ranked right now, and SMU, they need some help to get to the ACC title game, where again, that's going to be the only way SMU gets into this playoff. They are not getting in as an at-large boys. And even then, SMU doesn't control its own destiny for the ACC. So, SMU is a solid team. It's not a terrible loss, but I wouldn't call it a quality loss either at the same time. So, Miami at 18, that makes sense to me too. USC at 19. I'd like to see that USC is getting a little bit of respect here at number 19 in the nation. Really respecting that Michigan win, as well as recognizing that, they played a good competitive game against Notre Dame. Had that somewhat fluky loss against Illinois as well. So I'm cool with USC being at 19. Iowa at number 20. Thank you for respecting Iowa. Oh my goodness, I was losing my mind over the AP poll. And listen, the AP poll, it's such a horrendous poll. Let's be so real with ourselves right now. It's a big reason why we started our own top 25 at Red Shirt Sports, because we were finding that, the AP bout was filled with non-ball knowers, right? So love to see Iowa ranked in the top 20. That is a dangerous football team that, doesn't get a ton of attention because maybe it's not the sexiest brand in the world. That Iowa defense, it's a well-coached defense. You know what you're going to get on the defensive side of the ball. But then offensively, they've really figured something out. They put up a 40 spot on Minnesota, and most of it didn't even involve their defense. That's mostly their offense doing that. That's a really good team there in Iowa, and they have a chance to prove that even further when they do play up against the Oregon Ducks, man. So really excited to see that go down. Only losses is, they do have the loss against Iowa State. That one's going to hurt them a little bit. That's probably why they're anchored down in 20. But then they also only have a 5-point loss against Indiana, and that's notable because that's the only team that was able to play within a possession with Indiana. Indiana has been able to kick everybody's ass and then some. So, love to see Iowa get some love. Is it a touch high? Maybe, but I just love the fact that Iowa's ranked, man. They deserve it wholeheartedly. Michigan at 21, the team up north, the Michigan Wolverines. I understand them being ranked ahead of Missouri because I think Michigan is doing a little bit better from a health perspective. Michigan, they do have the loss to USC, and then they do have the loss to Oklahoma as well. They do have a win against Washington. That's a nice win. Michigan at 21. That makes sense. I'm cool with them at 21. Missouri at 22. Definitely could be a team that's descending in the wrong direction as we get to the month of November. It's not fully their fault. They just lost their starting quarterback to looks like it's going to be a season-ending injury. They do have the basically true freshman Matt Skulvers going for them now. They're coming off a bye week. We'll see what Missouri is made of, but definitely a team to watch for possibly falling out of the top 25 this time next week. They play Texas A&M. We'll talk about them in a second. Washington at 23. That's a nice team. Although Washington, when they played like really good teams, like they played Michigan and then they played Ohio State, they lost to both of those teams. But Washington, the quintessential, they're the quintessential, beat who you're supposed to beat, but then you lose who you're supposed to lose to. Kind of like James Franklin prior to this year. Washington, that's a good team there. They deserve to be in that top 25. Pitt at 24. Love to see Pitt getting ranked here. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see Pitt ranked in the top 25. Thought we might have to wait till next week, but Pitt, they have, ever since they made that quarterback change, they've a completely different team. Yes, the West Virginia DeVos looks awful, but again, I mean that team looks different, man. And like Pitt has a chance to really play spoiler in the ACC moving forward. I think they just have the one ACC loss, which is to Louisville, which really helps Louisville's resume if you really think about it, because that's a ranked win now for the Louisville Cardinals. So you love to see that for the Pitt Panthers at 24. Tennessee at 25. Now, Tennessee does have 3 losses. Their best wins against Mississippi State. I'm going to be honest, don't agree with Tennessee being ranked. I don't think that they should be ranked at all. I think that seems to be the popular sentiment. Because think about, look who they played. Any team that has had, legitimate aspirations, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Alabama, or whether most recently it's Oklahoma. Tennessee has not played with an actual pulse, right? So Tennessee at 25, I disagree with, which leads me to the G5. You can tell there is no G5 teams ranked. I do believe that at least Memphis should have been ranked, and then like some other like G5 contenders such as James Madison, San Diego State, South Florida, North Texas, like those schools, like they should have at least like been in the conversation, which really. So they mentioned this on the stream, or not on the stream, but like on the broadcast last night, talking about, hey, because we didn't have any G5 teams, we didn't have a 5th conference champion in there. They kept ranking the teams. So I'm really curious, one, with where Memphis is ranked exactly, like was the actual total ranking, and then where do they stand compared to their other G5 compatriots, because that's going to really tell the story in terms of, hey, like how open is this G5 spot going to be, right? Because that's the thing, right? I know we talked about earlier about like a possible chaos scenario where the ACC doesn't get in at all, but it seems like what the far more likely scenario is going to be is that the G5 is only going to one team. There is no road where we see multiple teams from the G5 make the playoff. I think it's going to be limited to one spot unless there's just some insane chaos in the month of November and somehow the G5 contenders, whether it's the American champion or it's a James Madison or San Diego State, they get through the rest of their seasons completely unscathed. But I definitely disagree with Tennessee being ranked. Definitely let me know down in the comment section or in the live chat. If you're watching this from the live chat, what you think down below, though. But overall, it's actually like a solid list. I mean, I have a couple of gripes here or there, but honestly, it's not terrible at all, right? So, hey, with that being said, that does leave us with 3 top 25 matchups that we are going to have here for College Football Red Zone in week number 11. So, what are those 3 top 25 games going to be? Excuse me. We're going to have number 7 BYU play number 8 Texas Tech. That's going to be in the noon window. And then we have 2 top 25 matchups also happening during the 3:30 window as well. We'll have number 3 Texas A&M taking on number 22 Missouri. That's a spot where, Missouri could potentially fall out of the rankings if Missouri can't pull it out against Texas A&M. And then the other game that, the AP wasn't going to have as a top 25 matchup, but we will, because of the CFP committee, number 9 Oregon's going to be taking on number 20 Iowa in Kinnick Stadium. So those 2 games are going to be happening during the 3:30 window. But with that being said, though, let's go ahead and jump into really talking about these games in a little bit of a deeper, deeper way, and just talking about who we think is going to win these games, right? So let's go ahead and get things started here. We got to start with that noon window. So last time that we saw like a big time Big 12 game happen, it ended up being like a 10 a.m. local kickoff game. Or it was either like a 10 a.m. local kickoff game, or the Cincinnati Utah game was gonna be a like that's an 8 p.m. local kickoff, but on like the East Coast, like it didn't like get started till like 10:15. So like if you're a Cincinnati fan, like you was down horrendous from a sleep perspective the next day. We got at least like a more reasonable kickoff time here. This one's going to be kicking off at 11 a.m. Eastern. Undefeated BYU is going to be traveling down to Lubbock, Texas, take on this Red Raiders squad, who does have a loss of Big 12 conference play. They do have the loss to Arizona State, was most of a win for the Sun Devils. Here's the thing, though. We do have a competitive opponent, like I said. BYU does have, they both have wins against Utah. That being said, Texas Tech does have a more dominant win than BYU has in the BYU Cougars, where BYU, yes, it was like a rivalry game, but also at the same time, what we did end up seeing was like BYU, had to work a little bit more for it. Now, Texas Tech, has been one of the more dominant profiles that we have seen in this sport this year for Texas Tech. We're talking about a team where they've been dominant this year. We know about this, being top 5 nationally in scoring offense. They're averaging over 43 points per game. They're also top 5 in scoring defense. So this is arguably one of the more complete teams in college football in the Texas Tech Red Raiders. But that being said, BYU, that doesn't mean that they can't hang with these guys. BYU, we thought about this like the same thing when, we thought BYU was going to be upset by Iowa State, and FanDuel actually mentioned that, hey, they're going to pull this, Iowa State was going to pull this upset off. They had them favored. That was not happening here. Same thing with the Holy War. Even though Utah was the one coming into town, Utah was favored. So BYU is certainly no stranger, especially in this last month, where we would end up seeing like BYU be an underdog, but be still able to overcome as an underdog. Now, that being said, even though BYU has beaten Utah, being able to beat Texas Tech and being able to do it on the road, that's a little bit of a different story. Now, what does help is that BYU is certainly one of the more balanced teams in the country offensively. They have averaged over 210 yards passing per game, but also have averaged over 210 yards rushing on a per game basis, according to Fox Sports. So BYU does have multiple ways to attack this Texas Tech defensive front. And I think that's really important for games like this, because Texas Tech, one of the more dominant defensive fronts, it's going to be the type of game where if BYU is going to be able to pull this win out, they're going to have to figure out what the defense is giving them and being able to execute in terms of, whatever the defense is giving them, whether it is, you see Texas Tech loading up on the box, and so Bear Bachmeier is going to have to win through the air, or whether it is maybe they focus more on, stopping Bear Bachmeier and trying to make him a pocket passer, being able to find a way to run the ball. It's very important, especially in this type of game where you have to figure out how you're going to be able to have that balance. Because if they're able to take one thing away, or it's a situation where like the scoring script is set up to where you're going to be forced to pass the ball a little bit more, you're a little bit more predictive with your with your offensive play calling. It'll be a long night for BYU, man. It's going to be a really long night. Texas Tech certainly knows how to get to the quarterback, and they also know how to put points up on the board. So I think that's going to be extremely important, which leads me to, what BYU needs to do on the defensive end if they want to pull this out. BYU, you're not going to lock down the Texas Tech offense. That's not happening, right? You're not going to be able to sit here and get the Texas Tech offense completely in a box. Now, if Barrett Morton goes down and they're down to their last scholarship quarterback, then it's a different conversation. But I mean, obviously we're not factoring that, so probably not going to get a lot of 3 and outs. What do you do in the red zone though? It's going to have to be a bend but don't break mentality for this BYU squad, right? If they're going to be able to pull this thing out, can you get those key stops in the red zone? if you can, then you set yourself up in a position where you can win, especially if you're forcing Texas Tech to settle for field goals instead of, allowing them to get touchdowns and all the time, whenever those red zone opportunities. Because I imagine the Red Raiders, they'll probably have multiple red zone opportunities in this one. On the opposite side, if you're BYU, you have to come away with touchdowns yourself. Like, this is not a type of game where, like, you can't settle for too many field goals. I expect this to be a little bit more of a higher scoring affair. So, yeah, I mean, like, for BYU, like, their keys to win is, like, offensively, definitely make sure you take what the defense gives you and execute well, so that the offensive play calling does not become too predictable. And then defensively for BYU as well, you're not stopping Texas Tech outright. Can you force them to settle for field goals when they get into the red zone instead of forcing them to get touchdowns? And then your Texas Tech, on the other hand, because you are a little more heavily favored team, listen, as long as, you don't have anything too crazy happen in terms of the turnover battle or anything too crazy in terms of, like, controlling the line, like, you don't lose in the line of scrimmage, like, nothing like that, because you do have the home crowd at your back. You should be fine. You just got to make sure that, like, as long as you take good care of the football, you should be okay in that matter. So let's go ahead and, for the first time tonight, let's go ahead, take a look at what the model thinks. And here's what the model is showing us, right? So the model and FanDuel, like, they best buddies right now. They are just sitting back and they're having themselves a good old time, because the model and FanDuel, they're on the exact same page. We're talking about, so FanDuel right now, as of earlier this afternoon, has Texas Tech as a 10.5 point favorite. And lo and behold, like, my internal model here on College Football Red Zone, exact same story, right? You're talking about them as a 10.5 point favorite. So, like, chef kiss to me for making an accurate model. As for the game itself, listen, BYU, this team has been an incredibly fun team to watch. At the same time, I really sit here thinking that, hey, like, Texas Tech, I think they're truly the class of the Big 12 with the way that they've dominated almost everybody this year. Whereas BYU, yes, they're undefeated. They've shown their flaws. And unless there is, like, an injury to, like, Brandon Morton, I feel really comfortable with rolling with the Red Raiders. That being said, BYU has shown a tremendous amount of fight. They're certainly no strangers of being doubted whatsoever. So I am going to go with BYU cover. I'm going to go with BYU cover in this situation. I think it's going to be a more competitive game than the 10.5 that you do see as your betting lines as of this afternoon. At the same time, though, I do think Texas Tech is a better team, being at home as well. I'm going to roll with the Red Raiders in this one, but I do believe that BYU, they're going to at least cover in this particular situation. All right, man. So that does at least, like, cover like the first game that we do have, but we still have a couple more games to go, right? We still have 2 more games on the docket. And both of these games are going to be happening in the free 30 window. And the beautiful thing about this is that, like, the previews that we're doing tonight, because I feel like we've had this happen, like, a handful of times this season, like, it's not just focused on one conference. We're really going to multiple conferences, and I think that's an extremely cool thing to do, right? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what we have as our next preview, which, by the way, guys, if you've been enjoying the content here on College Football Red Zone, if you're on Twitch, make sure you go ahead and give me a follow. And then if you're on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button, man. It really does help me from the bottom of your heart. Now let's go ahead and jump into really the highest ranked team that's going to be involved in terms of these top 25 previews. Let's go ahead and jump into number 3 Texas A&M taking on number 22 Missouri. Now, Texas A&M, they're the ones that are going to be making this road trip out in the great state of Missouri for a big matchup. Texas A&M, there were some conversations about possibly seeing Texas A&M being the number 1 ranked team in the nation. And listen, while it's not an argument that I would fully support, I mean, I could see the vision, right? Texas A&M, they're coming off of doing something that is somewhat difficult to do regardless of how good or bad LSU is. They completely silenced that building, and they took over the stadium. They're coming off of a 49-25 blowout win against LSU, and this was a couple of weeks ago. So Texas A&M, they are coming off a bye. They're feeling a little bit more well rested, and the bye week couldn't come in a better time, trying to get some extra gas before getting into the month of November, where we have always seen seasons made or broken. Now, that being said, can Texas A&M fight off against the battered Aggie syndrome? We'll just have to wait and see. Year number 2 under Mike Elko, has he truly turned the corner here at Texas A&M? Maybe we have, but at the same time, though, Missouri, they have a lot of pride as well. They have an extremely nice defense as well. One of the better defenses in the country. A defense has allowed less than 17 points per game. They've allowed less than 250 yards. The question, though, is that it's now going to be on that offensive side of the ball. What does that offense look like now that we have seen the injury to Bo Pribula, which we did mention? He's going to be out for the rest of this season. So no bye for Pribula. You also lost Sam Hartman early on in the season. I believe it was during the Central Arkansas game. So you're down to a true freshman quarterback in Matt Zollers. Now, that being said, Matt Zollers, true freshman, he was a highly talented recruit. He did come in the Vanderbilt game a couple of weeks ago, and he looked okay. He was solid. He was not a liquid or gas by any means. But now that he's had a couple of weeks prepared, is he going to be able to? This is not like the type of game where if Matt Zollers has to put the game on his back, Missouri is so cooked. They are absolutely cooked. Asking a true freshman quarterback to beat a top 5 team led by Mike Elko, who is a very good defensive mind. That's not a recipe for success, right? That's not something that you want to happen at all. We can't be having any of that. So a lot of this game, you're really looking at Ahmad Hardy, the ULM transfer, been averaging over 100 yards per game, running the ball. It's got to be a Ahmad Hardy game, man. He's got to be able to. I'm talking about carrying that ball 25, 30 times. I'm talking about 5 yards a carry. Ahmad Hardy, he got to put the team on his back, man. That is the best path for Missouri to win this game. The problem is that Texas A&M, they know how to handle things on the ground. They know how to win in the trenches. This is a very one of the best trench teams in the SEC, with Texas A&M averaging less than 120 yards allowed per game, on the ground. But they're also a team that knows how to run the ball as well. Over 200 yards rushing per game. They got that dual threat quarterback in Marcel Reed, who is always a problem to defend, whether you try to keep him in the pocket or you try to make him beat you with his mobility and taking away that passing game completely. Marcel Reed is a problem. But so you're looking at Missouri. What's the path for Missouri to win this game? I really do think the path for Missouri to win this football game, you really got to turn this into a rock fight. You're getting in a shootout against Missouri with with Texas A&M, and you're doing this with your first string quarterback in the process. That's not a recipe for success, even though this game is happening at home. Now, you turn this into a rock fight where this game is in the 30s or, even in the 40s. You got a chance to pull this upset off against a top 5 team in the SEC. That is absolutely possible. In terms of other things to look out for, as long Missouri, they got to hold their own in the trenches. We talked about this as well in terms of Texas A&M being able to be one of the best teams in the SEC and in college football in terms of that line of scrimmage play. There's not a lot of teams that can match up one for one. Do I think we'll see how good Missouri's front seven is what I'm trying to say. They played really well against Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt and Texas A&M are completely they're completely different ball games, and it might be a situation where Missouri is going to have to win that turnover margin, maybe by +2 or more, or maybe special teams has to create a field position advantage where Missouri is starting with 15 to 20 yards of better field position then Texas A&M, and then of course, like in red zone opportunities, you got to convert those red zone opportunities as well. So, all right, second time tonight. Let's go ahead and take a field trip to the model once again. What does the model tell us? So, the model is actually a little bit higher on Missouri than FanDuel is right now. So far, we have seen as of this afternoon, Texas A&M is favored by about a touchdown as of right now. Model is a little bit higher on the Tigers. They think that Missouri should only be about a field goal underdog. That is with home field advantage baked in. It is more of an expectation-based model, though it hasn't accounted yet for performances, full game performances without Bo Pribula. With that being said, I don't really like the spot for the Missouri Tigers because we have seen Texas A&M does have an ability to put up points in a hurry, especially with what they did against LSU, which we thought in their own right was, maybe not an elite defensive unit, but we thought they were at least a pretty good defensive unit, and it just didn't matter. Texas A&M, they have shown that they have been able to scale upward. Missouri just hasn't really shown that, and that's evident in their two losses. Both their losses going against ranked opponents. Missouri does not have a ranked win, at least one that I'm aware of. So because of the fact that Texas A&M has been able to scale up its level of play, like compared to the level of competition, then what Missouri has done, I'm going to disagree with my model here because I don't necessarily like the spot. Even though your first string quarterback in Matt Zollers, he has been able to prepare for multiple weeks for this game, Texas A&M has also been able to do that too. So I don't just believe that Texas A&M is going to win this game. I also believe that Texas A&M is also going to cover this game as well. So I'm going to disagree with my model here. I'm going to disagree in the model in the sense that Missouri is going to cover. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. We're going to go with Texas A&M winning. We're also going to go with Texas A&M to cover as well. All right. So that leaves us with just one more game that we got to cover. We covered the biggest game in the Big 12. We covered the biggest game in the SEC. In short, we're going to cover the biggest game that's happening in the Big 10. Because we do actually, seems like in the first time in weeks, we have an actual ranked game between Big 10 teams. The Big 10 been a little bit disappointing. Got to keep it real with y'all, man. With that being said, before we get into this final game that we have, in terms of the game breakdown, we do guys go ahead and do a couple of things, wherever it is you're located right now on Twitch, or whether you're watching this live on the YouTube platform. If you're watching this live on Twitch, go ahead, feel free to hit me up with that follow button. We plan on streaming multiple times a week. We always do something special on Saturday whenever we have the time to do so. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, it only takes a couple of seconds to do so. Hitting that like and subscribe helps me out tremendously in terms of growing the channel. What we do on Saturdays is exactly what the name of this channel is in College Football Redzone, man. So definitely make sure you go ahead and if you're on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're on Twitch, make sure you hit that follow button. I would truly appreciate both of these things. Now, with that being said, biggest game happening in the Big Ten. Didn't know if it was going to happen. The AP didn't agree that this should be a top 25 matchup. We also know the AP is filled with non-ball knowers. Number 9 Oregon is going to be traveling to Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City, Iowa, to take on the now ranked Iowa Hawkeyes, ranked number 20 in the entire country. Boy, am I so excited for this game. First of all, I'm excited that Iowa is getting some flowers. They've been playing really good football here in the month of October. They have a really close loss to Indiana. They've just been playing really good ball, and I'm glad that the CFP is paying Iowa some respect. But then we get to see them against a team that does have a legitimate chance of possibly, getting into the Big Ten title game if Ohio State or Indiana slips up a little bit. This really could shape, what both of these teams, like the rest of their Big Ten seasons, could end up looking like. Now, for Oregon, Oregon's been a really interesting team to profile, right? So the eye test for me tells me that Oregon is close to a top 5 team with the way that they dominated people, particularly early on in the year, right? Thinking about, what they did to Montana State. And I know Montana State's an FCS program, but that is one of the best teams in the FCS. And even when they go up against FBS competition, Montana State is not a team that gets blown out very often. That is a very proud program there in Montana State. They did Oklahoma State extremely dirty. They did Northwestern kind of dirty as well. So, they had this great start to the year. We thought that they had this really good win against Penn State, but that has aged like milk. That's been left in a refrigerator after you lost power for multiple days. It smells nasty now, particularly because we did see Oregon go into overtime. And then what we've seen from Oregon this past week is, they've struggled against Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's been a team that has really struggled to do much of anything this year. Like, they've hardly had any kind of pulse. So for them to sit back and struggle against that team, it makes me wonder, are the Oregon Ducks, is this version of the Oregon Ducks, are they starting to run out of gas a little bit, right? Just based off of, what we've seen from the Wisconsin performance, where they struggled against Wisconsin. The Indiana performance, where even with a defensive touchdown, they were hardly in that game. They lost 30-20. If it wasn't for a defensive touchdown, it could have been worse. That's the crazy part. It could have been much worse. So, is this a team that is running out of gas in the month of November? I think that's a valid question based off of what we've seen from them in the past couple of weeks. Now, they do have a ton of weaponry. Like this is still like a really good offensive outfit, averaging over 40 points per game. You don't do that on accident, like regardless of who you're going up against. Like Dante Moore, still looks pretty good. You got some nice weapons out on the outside. You do have this, plethora of tailbacks that they can rely on at any given time. It's just whatever has happened the last couple weeks. They have been able to put it all together. Can they finally, is this like a wake-up game for Oregon? Was last week, the last game against Wisconsin, was that the wake-up game? Or are we going to see a better offensive performance against this Iowa team? Because unlike Wisconsin, Iowa actually has a defense. Now, Iowa's always had a defense out there in that beautiful Corn State. They know how to stop teams, and it may not be filled with super talented athletes, like maybe what we would see from a premium Georgia defense. You don't have the same athletes as Ohio State's defense, but Kurt Franz, he knows how to coach defense, man, and it's a fundamentally sound defense. It's a defense that is not going to beat itself too terribly often, and that's that is a team that, it shows in the defensive stats. It's only allowed 13 points per game. Now, what has always held off the Iowa team as a whole back has always been their offense. And this year, the offense hasn't been great by any means. If you look at the offensive numbers, they're averaging 24 points a game. Not great. It's not super great by any means. But they do have an offense, and I think they really found Mark Gronkowski has done a really nice job in terms of running that offense. And while it's nothing flashy up there in Iowa City, they do, unlike in previous years, they do have an actual offense. Now, for Iowa to come out here and pull this upset off, I still think the best path for them is to make this a rock fight. I still don't necessarily feel comfortable in terms of getting into a shootout and expecting Iowa to come out and win a shootout. We have seen them do it this year, surprisingly. They've done it against Rutgers earlier this year on a Week 9 game. At the same time, that's Rutgers, so we're talking about Oregon. Oregon, a much better football team than the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, obviously. So, okay, other key storylines to definitely keep an eye on. Can Iowa control the time of possession? Can they win third downs and maybe force Oregon to be a little bit less comfortable offensively? Limiting those possessions, I think, could really help Iowa out for sure. And then can the Iowa Hawkeyes also prevent Oregon from generating big plays? and really stopping drives quickly. Because if Oregon is able to get a little bit more methodical drives, they can get more into their high tempo offense, and that could create some issues for Iowa, even though they do have home field advantage at their back, and it's a pretty stout run defense as well. Which that's another thing too. If Iowa can win in the trenches and stop Oregon's rushing attack, it's a pretty good rushing attack. One that is average over 230 yards rushing per game. That would at least help Iowa, because if you can at least force Oregon to be one-dimensional, that's going to help with that defensive play calling as well. But, okay, let's check. For last time tonight, let's go ahead. What does the model have in store for us? And look at this. The model is essentially calling this a toss-up here, Chad. FanDuel is calling this a Oregon minus 6.5. But the model loves this Iowa Hawkeyes team, man. They're not favorites, but I mean, it's essentially a pick'em here, guys. Oregon minus a half point. So, like, this is with home field advantage. So, on a neutral side field right now, we're probably talking about Oregon minus 4 according to the model. Thing is, this game is not happening on neutral side field. It's happening in Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City, Iowa. I'll tell you what, man. The more that I sit here and think about this, listen, Iowa has been doubted. They have been criminally underrated for far too long this season. And I'm so glad that Iowa's getting the attention that they deserve. And I'm hoping that this game specifically provides the Hawkeyes with that proper attention that they should have gotten weeks ago, but in a positive way and in a positive fashion as well. I'm going to go a little bit on the whim in this one to end the night. Give me Iowa not just to cover. Iowa's going to win this football game. I think they take down top 10 Oregon at home, and Iowa makes a statement in the month of November in Kinnick Stadium, getting that win for the kids fighting cancer in their children's hospital right next to the stadium, man. I really think Iowa can do it. But with that being said, guys, that is going to wrap things up in terms of, our live stream here tonight. We did take a look at the initial CFP rankings, and we also took a look at those top 25 matchups happening around the country based on those initial CFP rankings. Definitely let me know, who you think is going to win those games. Do you disagree with any of my picks? Let me know down in the comment section. Love to see your guys' comments, even if I can't get to them right away. But with that being said, guys, this is College Football Red Zone signing off over on YouTube and Twitch. With that being said, guys, I'm just so excited for Saturday. We got a lot of big games happening. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. As I'm your host, Jake of College Football Red Zone, signing off. You guys are all out there having a good one. Take care and good night, everybody.